Meyer. Good morning. It's great to see folks. Folks are still coming in from the waiting room. Just our sports minute today. The Celtics hung the banner, won the opener. I was sitting in the literal last row in section 322. But I have to say there was a clip of Sam Hauser because they tied the number of three-pointers in an NBA game. And by the end of the game, we were booing them because they kept missing 3 points to come ahead. And there was some strategy because they held the ball at the end. But Sam Hauser was being interviewed, and he said, we were getting booed on banner night, and we were up by 30 points. And I was like, if that's not the Celtics fans, I don't know what it is. Anyway, so I said World Series, what? So who cares about the World Series? We've got the Celtics. So we're so excited to continue our kind of connection with the early childhood agenda, to have one of the coalitions that has been in existence for a long time, and we are happy to be connected with them, with the Lift Our Kids Coalition. And we're excited to have Naomi with us this morning to give us an update. And then totally by 9:30 call luck, tomorrow we're having Representative Decker and Senator DiDomenico, who are chairing the Special Commission on Poverty, to kind of share where they are in the process. They've held a series of public meetings, and so we will hear from them. So it's a good tie-in this week, just thinking about all these different parts of the agenda. So Naomi, I'll turn things over to you. You should be able to share slides if you have them. If not, no worries. And we look forward to the update.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Amy. Really appreciate being invited to share information with everybody today. And I do have some slides. So let me see if I can make that work.
And while you're sharing, always our 9:30 call question, Naomi, for you to tell us a little bit about you and how you came to be in your current role.
Okay, yes. So I am lead attorney in the welfare law unit at Greater Boston Legal Services. I've been here for 22 years. And so my day-to-day is representing very low-income families, some individuals, but mostly single moms with kids, to help them access subsistence benefits from the Department of Transitional Assistance, as well as childcare subsidies. So really focusing on these means-tested benefits for the families who need them in order to just get by, meet their basic needs. And then as part of that work, or coming out of that work of the day-to-day, seeing the issues that families face, we do a lot of legislative advocacy as well. And I'm one of the, as Amy said, one of the leaders of the Lift Our Kids Coalition. Really, Mass Law Reform Institute and Greater Boston Legal Services help lead that coalition. But we, in fact, have 160 organizations around the state who are members, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about it and encourage anybody here who's not already a member to join in. Either your organization could become a member, or you individually could just get on our email list. So I'll talk a little bit more about that.
Thank you.
Okay, so folks can see my slides, I hope.
Yep, you're good to go.
Okay, so I apologize that for some reason, this main one, our Lift Our Kids logo, came out a little blurry, so we'll just move right on to the next one to talk about what it is that our coalition is trying to do. So Lift Our Kids formed to try to improve our cash assistance programs for our very lowest income families. There are lots of other coalitions out there doing all kinds of wonderful work on other poverty issues, around housing, around all kinds of things that people need. But we saw that there wasn't a group focused specifically on the cash assistance program, which is it's kind of not popular in the in the sort of societal view of, it's welfare. Why do people need that? Sure, nobody here is saying that, but there, it doesn't have as popular a reputation in Massachusetts or nationally. And so we really wanted to address specifically the cash assistance programs. So here's what we were dealing with. In Massachusetts, we have 2 cash assistance programs. The one for families with children is called TAFDC, Transitional Aid to Families with Dependent Children. The other one, we have a program called EAEDC, which is primarily for elders and people with disabilities. And both of these programs had suffered from neglect, and their grants were frozen for years. So they did not have any cost of living increase. And so they just had literally exactly the same amount that they were giving people for years and years and years. You can see here for TFDC, there was one increase back in the year 2000, and that's already a very long time ago until we started this current campaign. And for EADC, there had been no increase at all since 1988. So, what does inflation do? Inflation eats away at the value of that grant, and grants were never very much, but they became just worth less and less and less. And it was absurd to think that anybody could actually live on it. So that was the problem that we were seeking to address. Currently, in terms of who's impacted, there's over 43,000 families receiving TFDC cash assistance. There's another 31,000 older adults and persons with disabilities. That's mostly individuals getting the benefit. Sometimes there's couples who are getting it together. But so, it's a lot of folks, a lot of people, and these are really the lowest income people in our state, in our communities. We also know that these very low grants disproportionately impact children of color. You can see the data here that percentage of children on TFDC who are Latinx or Black is much higher than the percentage of the population. And so, for lots of historical reasons, there are more families with children of color needing this benefit and trying to get by on it. And so, of course, the impact of these very, very inadequate grants is disproportionately on them. So what are we doing? There you can see Rep. Decker and Senator Domenico, who I know are going to be with you tomorrow. They are also the lead legislators in the House and Senate on this campaign. They have been since Lift Our Kids formed in 2016, and we've had this campaign to raise grants going since 2019. This session, you have the bill numbers here, and of course, new bills will need to be filed in January when the new legislative session starts. But they filed bills that call for 5% increases to cash assistance grants each year until they reach half of the federal poverty level. And I want to say at the outset that that's an incredibly modest goal. None of us think that half of the federal poverty level is actually enough. But when we started this campaign, grants were about a third of the federal poverty level. And the cost of, increasing it is the challenge that we face, right? Getting more money committed. And so we talked to Rep. Decker and Senator Domenico about what is a goal that we think we could actually attain, and half of the federal poverty level is referred to as deep poverty. And we thought that we could make a pretty compelling case that no child in Massachusetts should live in deep poverty. And so that is our very modest goal. So the bills would call for annual increases until we reach that goal, and then continued small increases just to keep up with inflation indefinitely, so that we don't run into the same problem again of lost value to inflation, right? To try to prevent that happening again in the future. So they filed bills. And in addition to pursuing the legislation, we also every year have pursued a budget campaign. Since these bills would cost money, we really have to pay attention to that cost and try to get the money put into the budget as well. And the budget is actually where we have, so the bills have not been passed yet, but the budget is where we have made significant progress since we started this campaign. So this shows you the increases that we have won. So this is these numbers are what the maximum grant is for a family of 3. If you can believe it, from July 2000 through December 2020, so over 20 years, the maximum grant that a family of 3, so typically a mom with 2 kids, could get in Massachusetts was $593 a month. You cannot live on that in Massachusetts. As I know you all know, right? Kids have needs, they're expensive. So then we had some early success. We never got as much as we were asking for, but we did consistently get increases in the budget. So starting January 2021, we got a 10% grant increase that raised grants to a maximum of $652. And as you can see, we got continued increases in each budget along the way each year. The last one that took effect was in October 2022. That was part of the FY23 budget. And grants were raised to a maximum of $783 for a family of 3. So that's where we are right now. So for the next budget, we did win for FY24. The legislature put in, and the governor signed at the time, an increase of another 10% that would have taken effect. It had a delayed effective date, unfortunately, but it would have taken effect in April 2024. It would have raised grants to a maximum for a family of 3 of $861. However, before that grant could take effect, the governor announced in January, she announced what are called 9C cuts, which are basically if the, although the legislature sets the budget, if the governor determines that there isn't enough money that's been allocated to do all the things that the legislature, said should be done in the budget, then she gets unilateral authority to just make cuts as necessary in order to fit within the funding that's been provided. So back in January, when revenues were falling shorter than expected for the Commonwealth as a whole, the governor announced these cuts. Among those cuts were eliminating this increase that we had, this hard-fought increase that we had won. We were very upset about it. We were protesting on the State House steps last January. And so that increase did not happen. It was very frustrating, but it certainly gave us strong ammunition to go back to the legislature and say, hey, we gotta, we gotta address this and keep making progress for families. They did put in the increase again for this fiscal year, again, unfortunately, with a delayed start date of April 2025. We have been advocating to try to get them to move up the start date, so far without success, but those efforts are ongoing. but and to make sure it doesn't get cut again, although we have some hope. The governor certainly caught a lot of pushback, a lot of criticism and flack for cutting this benefit increase for the very, very, very lowest income folks who are, you know, trying to just survive in our state. And so we're hopeful that she wouldn't do that again. But
And
absolutely.
Naomi, there is a question about why the delayed start date.
Oh, sure. Very good question. Yeah, it's not something that we ever want. The legislature sometimes does that in a given budget just in order to reduce the cost for that fiscal year, right? So if they're making an increase for the entire fiscal year, that costs a certain amount. But if they don't start it until 3/4 of the way through the fiscal year, then for that year, it only costs a quarter of the amount. And although we obviously always want the increases to start as soon as possible, you know, to the extent that the new amount sets a floor for the following fiscal year, you know, sets a new floor that we're not going to cut back from, you know, we'd rather get, our view has been, we would rather get a 10% increase in April than say a 2% increase in October, because then you've only raised the floor 2% instead of 10. But this past year, it did leave us vulnerable to cuts, right? I think it would have been much harder for the administration to cut something that had already, to cut back an increase that had already been made. So it definitely, you know, came back to bite us. But again, it wasn't something we ever wanted. It was what we, you know, was the compromise that we had to agree to in order to get anything. But so, yeah, very good question. But so this is where we are. Just a couple of other sort of ways to think about it. So how much is, oops, sorry, this is not completely updated number. The deep poverty level now is actually $1,076, not 36, $76 for a family of 3. As I said earlier, the deep poverty level is simply half of the federal poverty level. So yeah, I need to update these top 2 bars for 2024 numbers, but the maximum grant of $783 is still, because we didn't get the increase in April, that is still the current number. So you can see that although we have made incremental progress almost every year since we started this, we still have a ways to go to even reach that very, very modest goal. Just another way to think about this is that if you took grants as they were in 1988 and just adjusted them for inflation, no actual increase in value or buying power, they would now be $1,390 a month. So this is just another way to think about what we've lost and how hard it is for families to try to survive. And just one more graphic for those who like these visuals. This kind of shows you the progress of what we've done and the gap that we still have to fill. So the red line is what that maximum grant amount is for a family of 3. So back in 1988, it was $539, small bump in 2000, and then no increase until this campaign. Over to the right of the screen, you can see this, you know, significant increases in the red line as this campaign started to make progress. You can see how the poverty level just keeps going up every year because that's what inflation does. And the blue line, the deep poverty level, is just half of that. So that also goes up. For a few years, from 2021 through 2023, we made some significant progress in closing that gap between the red and the blue lines. And then it started to open up again as we didn't get an increase this past year. And we all know that inflation, there were a couple years in there where inflation was much higher than usual and really made it harder to catch up, right? So So I will stop the screen share to check. Are there other questions, Amy, that I have not seen?
There, Anna Doherty added that the Prenatal to 3 Policy Impact Center published its annual roadmap yesterday. And there's a link to the mass snapshot based on their research. On today's topic of poverty, you see the drop down under state minimum wage to see what 7.8% of mass kids under 3 with at least one parent working full-time are living near poverty.
Oh, thank you. I hadn't seen that one yet. I'll have to take a look.
And then there is a question. So just confirming, well, and first of all, Naomi, thank you for all of that dense information and just
I know it's dense.
but explaining also kind of like why it matters about vehicles and policy and timing, because I think we see this often happen about like something. Anyway, thank you for that. Rachel is just confirming understanding of 50% of poverty level. So poverty level for a family of 3 is 25,000 a year. Then TANF would increase to a total of about 12.5 a year, or about $1,000 a month.
Right. So again, for FY24, for a family of 3, the goal number would be $1,076 a month. So, and again, I mean, every time I talk about this with anybody, I sort of cringe at the, like, that's all we're asking for.
Right,
because
right.
We know it's not enough, but you can also see the amount of effort and years that it's taken to even make the progress. You know, we have made a lot of progress, but it's been incremental, bit by bit each year. You know, they're just anything that costs money, right? There's always that kind of battle to get new money committed to something. And so although we would all like to see people get the, you know, at least the poverty level, and to Titus's point, the poverty level already we know is not, that's a national number. And even the poverty level is not enough to actually get you out of poverty in Massachusetts, where we have very high costs in our state, you know, high rent, all those things. So we know it's not enough. But you need to, that it was most strategic to pick a goal that seemed reachable. That if we just went in there and we, you know, said, give everybody, you know, a lot more, you know, if we doubled the cost of the ask, that we might not be taken seriously. And so, you know, it's a strategy call, which is hard for some of us to stomach because families need so much more. But I can tell you, and I'm sure many of you see these families as well, from the families that I work with, although it's not enough, even these small increases, you know, if they get a 10% increase, they notice, right? I mean, if your whole income if your income is increased by 10% and that gets you another, you know, 70 or 80 bucks a month, families tell us, oh my God, I can finally afford enough diapers, or, you know, so, you know, and I'm sure I don't have to tell you all that, right? It makes a difference, and we're going to just keep plugging away. And we really, really value your voices, right? This is what makes a difference, is that when we are trying to get the legislature to pay attention and get co-sponsors on the bill, and convince the Ways and Means committees to put in their budget that, yes, we need to allocate more for this. It's hearing all of your voices that makes a difference.
Thank you for that. Brian also added, Brian Gold, Naomi, on EC 101, we have a page for economic assistance and security programs. If there are programs, and he added a link, if there are programs that are missing or data we should include related to your work with Lift Our Kids, please let me know. We'll also take a look at the new numbers today from the PN3 report. And I think kind of from strategies for children's perspectives, you know, to see, you know, this was one of the agendas, so the democratic process of voting on all the priorities to the early childhood agenda 2 years ago, you know, this was part of it. And I think for us, as, you know, to be in a learning stance to better understand how all these pieces fit together, both in the budget, through legislative, through bills, but also through just bigger policy. And so when you think about holistically about children and families, all these pieces matter. And so I think I'm also curious, and I don't know if we know yet, about the data dashboard from EEC, and if there's something or you know, we're gonna have the folks on from paid family medical leave on in a few weeks in the 9:30 call. So we have some data to like share to see this picture of where children and families are in Massachusetts. So thinking about maybe for next session how we put this together so we can understand where all the support is, where the gaps are, and to your point, like why it's so important that people are thinking of these things holistically when we're thinking about policy recommendations, like not to pit, you know, topics against each other, but to understand like every lever that we try to move has a direct impact.
Thanks,
Tom
Amy. So I
Weber,
just want to note that I put our website in
thank
the
you.
chat, Lift Our Kids MA. So anybody who wants to learn more or wants to
Great.
get on our there's a place you can sign up there just to get on our email list. Encourage folks to do that. And again, if you are at an organization that might be interested in signing on as a member, you know, what that means initially is just that once you've agreed to that and, you know, endorsed us, we can add you to our list, which does, you know, we hand that list of currently 160 organizations to legislators when we meet with them, and their eyes, you know, oh, look at that. And they start looking for the ones in their districts or what, you know, it makes an impression, and it's really helpful. And then to the extent that you know, member organizations are able to do more to, you know, share our social media or help, you know, come to our lobby days or, you know, whatever more folks are able to do is always welcome. But we understand how busy everyone is. So there's not a specific greater commitment than, you know, you putting your name.
Tom Weber also adds, thank you, Naomi, for leading this work for 22 years at Greater Boston Legal Services and continuing the work to ensure the needs of these families are on the radar while so many opportunities are given to look the other way. Naomi,
Thanks,
I've been
Tom.
at Strategies for 22 years. We should start some sort of a
I know.
22-year club. Just would appreciate you being here today. I love that we have the senator and the rep tomorrow to kind of continue this conversation.
Yeah.
And, you know, we had our early childhood agenda convening last week. There's another one planned for December. We know the work groups are working, and we know we are so grateful for the existing coalitions that are doing this work too. So second Naomi's kind of plug to join Lift Our Kids. So thank you, Naomi. And if you send me the slides, which are great, we'll add them to our follow-up folder, and then we'll hopefully see folks tomorrow to hear more from Senator DiDomenico and Representative Decker. Have a great day. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.